Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Boker Tov. Ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, wonderful to see all of the generations here this morning. We're following the news, of course, and we know that the situation in Ukraine is horrific. We know that it is quite likely to get worse before it gets better. And I ultimately am going to speak about what I believe are our moral obligations at this time. Leading up to that, I want to share a few thoughts that will put this in perspective. So the first thought, we have all seen reflections of people who have connections to Ukraine, many who are Jewish, many whose families left generations ago, many who themselves left, many who are still there, many who have family that died before the Shoah, during the Shoah, after the Shoah. And these reflections have to be recognized, and they have to be honored, and they should inspire advocacy, which I'll be speaking about later on. At the end of the day, these are human beings who are resisting abject tyranny, and they need to be supported. So too do the stories and reflections of people who have connections to the Middle East and connections to East Asia and Africa, many of whom, as we know, are Jewish as well. People who left these places generations ago or recently, or people who are still there, their stories need to be recognized and honored, and they need to inspire advocacy as well. And Jewish people, like all groups, struggle at times to balance response to one another with our humanitarian response to help all people. But believing as we do in Tselem Elohim, that every human being bears the divine spark, we need to acknowledge that anyone who is facing tyranny, anyone who is suffering and fleeing or remaining and fighting, or some combination of both, regardless of who they are, regardless of their background, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their economic status, needs to be supported, and we need to exercise advocacy as well. Second thought, evil often is clearer than good, or at least it can proceed with a certain clarity and directness. I am going to quote from the talented musical duo, the Indigo Girls. Darkness has a hunger that's insatiable, and lightness has a call that's hard to hear. Sometimes darkness has its own cruel but consistent logic, especially since evil doesn't care whether it tells the truth or tells lies. Evil doesn't care about collateral damage. Evil doesn't care about nuance or subtlety or balancing priorities. Evil just proceeds. And goodness needs to find its strength in response. So I'm going to take us back. The holiday of Purim is coming up. And you remember what Haman said to King Ahasuerus to convince the king to allow for the destruction of the Jewish people across the empire. It had its own internal logic, and it was calculatingly evil. Haman said, Yeshno am echad mefuzar umefarad bein ha'amim uvechol medinot malchutecha v'datehem shonot mikol am v'yet datei hamelech einam osim v'lamelech ein shoveh lahanicham. A perfect template for an anti-Semitic argument throughout the ages. One, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the other peoples throughout your realm. True? True. Their laws are different from those of the other people. In many respects, true. They do not obey the king's laws. That's the lie that Haman snuck in. That because these people are different, they are not loyal subjects. We have heard that argument made throughout the generations. But Two truths and a lie. By the time you get to the lie, the person is likely to believe the whole thing. There is an inexorable logic to how Haman presents himself. Evil often proceeds more easily and with fewer complications than goodness. Those who do good care about nuance. Those who do good care about truth. Those who do good care about collateral damage and balance all of those things, which I'll get to. Now, Mordecai's appeal to Queen Esther to face the king, not as perfectly logical. I'm going to share it with us. Mordecai says to Esther, Al tidami b'nafshech lihimalet beit hamelech mikol Yehudim. Don't imagine that you of all the Jews will escape with your life just because you're in the king's palace. Ki him acharesh tacharishi be'ed hazot revach v'hatzala yamod lehudim mimakom acher ve'at uveit avicha tovedu. On the contrary, if you keep quiet, help will come from elsewhere, and you and your father's house will perish. I understand what Mordecai was trying to convey. Don't imagine just because you're in the palace that you're going to be okay. You are going to be persecuted like everybody else. But why tell her if you don't step up, someone else will? Why not empower her to step up in that moment? And then that's exactly what Mordecai does. Umi yodea im la'et kazot higat lamalchut. Who knows? Perhaps you have attained the royal position for just such a moment. So if not you, it'll be somebody else, but make it you. You're not going to survive. You really need to stand up. In some ways, it's not as inexorably logical as Haman, but you know what? Goodness often isn't. And ultimately, what he is able to say with clarity is, step up. This is your moment. This is why you are here. Step up despite your fear and say and do what you need to say and what you need to do. So here I come to my major theme for this morning. We all need to step up. We need to act courageously. We need to say and do what needs to be said and needs to be done. And what is that? So I want to quote Natan Sharansky, famous Jewish advocate imprisoned in Russian prison for years, came to Israel, a leader of the Jewish people. Here's what he said. Putin is seeking to change the entire post-World War II order in which your stronger neighbor cannot take away your freedom. He wants to restore to a time where if you're strong, you can take. That's what he wants to do. He wants to challenge the entire free world. He believes that he is the only one in the world ready to use force and that he will restore historic Russian dominance. So the only thing we can do to stop him, says Sharansky, is to have the absolute solidarity of the free world. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky, the courageous Jewish leader of Ukraine, whose great-grandfather and 3 great-uncles were murdered in the Shoah, denounced Russia many times, recently in a video, for doing what the Nazis did, destroying masses of innocent people. He said to Putin, in effect, you claim you want to denazify Ukraine, you are acting like the Nazi. And he singled out in particular the shelling of Babi Yar, a memorial to over 33,000 Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust. He appealed to the Jewish community to stand up and to denounce the killing that is taking place. To put that in perspective, he himself is stepping up as Esther did and challenging all of us in our own ways with whatever resources we have to step up as well. And I will say, we need to speak out against the killing of innocent civilians. We need to provide support for those who are under attack, for those who are staying put, as well as those who are seeking to flee. We sent out an email and we'll send a follow-up to the congregation urging ways that we can contribute to those organizations that are doing important work on the ground. This is a horrible situation that is getting worse. Zelensky and his co-leaders and the people of Ukraine are stepping up courageously. We need to show our support. We need to demonstrate that we are not going to be silent in the face of tyranny. Doing good is often more complicated than doing evil. Doing good has to take all sorts of considerations into our own calculations, and yet there are moments that call for decluttering, that call for moral clarity of understanding and of action. We need to support those who are resisting with whatever resources are at our disposal. So I ask us to approach Eight Hazot, this moment, and I am referring to the words that Mordechai shared with Esther, with our eyes open to see the danger, our mouths open to speak the truth, our hands open toward those who are resisting tyranny and need our help. Umi yodeya, who knows? Maybe we were all put here in this moment, at this time, so that we can say and do the right thing. Shabbat Shalom.